Maximinus Thrax. Imperator Caesar Gaius, Julius Verus Maximinus Pius, Felix Invictus Augustus, 235 through 238. Maximinus Thrax. Born 172 or 173 in Thrace or Moesia. Children: a son of Gaius Julius, Verus Maximinus. Accession February or March of 235. His wife was Cecilia Paulina. He was murdered by the troops at Aquileia, April of 238. Maximinus was probably the biggest man ever to hold the office of Roman emperor. The Historia Augusta has it that he was 8 feet 6 inches, or 2.6 meters tall, and so strong that he could pull laden carts unaided. The size of his footwear was also legendary, and the expression Maximinus's boot came to be used in popular parlance for any tall or lanky individual. Surviving portrait busts, such as this one from the Louvre, show Maximinus as a heavily muscled man with powerful jaw and close-cropped hair, the image of a seasoned soldier. Not for him the meditative, spiritual pose favored by Alexander Severus. Beach giant skull unearthed by WPA workers near Victoria, believed to be largest ever found in world. Normal head also found. That Texas had a giant on the beach in the long ago appears probable from the large skull recently unearthed in a mound in Victoria County, believed to be the largest human skull ever found in the United States, and possibly in the world. Twice the size of the skull of normal man, the fragments were dug up by W. Duffin, archaeologist who is excavating the ground in Victoria County under a WPA project sponsored by the University of Texas. In the same ground, and at the same level, a normal-sized skull was found. The pieces taken from the mound were reconstructed in a WPA laboratory under supervision of physical anthropologists. A study is being made to determine whether the huge skull was that of a man belonging to a tribe of extraordinarily large men, or whether the skull was that of an abnormal member of a tribe, a case of gigantism. Several large human body bones also have been unearthed at the site. Martis B. Goldstein, physical anthropologist employed on the WPA project, formerly was an aide of Ailes Adrican, curator of the National Museum of Physical Anthropology. Finds made through excavations in Texas are beginning to give weight to the theory that man lived in Texas 40,000 to 45,000 years ago, it is said. Giant skull believed to be possibly the largest found in the world. The human skull shown on the right was recently unearthed in Victoria County by Texas University anthropologists. The other two are of normal size. Explorations in Grand Canyon. Mysteries of immense rich cavern being brought to light. Jordan is enthused. Remarkable finds indicate ancient people migrated from Orient. Mr. Kincaid's report. Mr. Kincaid was the first white child born in Idaho and has been an explorer and hunter all his life, 30 years having been in the service of the Smithsonian Institute. Even briefly recounted, his history sounds fabulous, almost grotesque. First, I would impress that the cavern is nearly inaccessible. The entrance is something feet down in the southern wall. It is located in government land and no visitor will be allowed there under penalty of trespass. The scientists wish to work unmolested, without fear of the archaeological discoveries being disturbed by curio or relic hunters. A trip there would be fruitless and the visitor would be sent on his way. The story of how I found the cavern has been related, but in a photograph I was journeying down the Colorado River in a boat alone, looking for something. Some 42 miles up the river from the something crystal caves I saw on the east wall, stains in the sedimentary formation about 2,000 feet above the riverbed. There was no trail to this point, but I finally climbed it with great difficulty. Above a knoll which hid it from view from the river was the mouth of the cave. There's a view looking from this entrance route 30 yards in what was of the cavern was inhabited. Unfortunately, I don't have the rest of that article, but I do have more that are better. So that's supposedly the one that's the Egyptian location found in the Grand Canyon. Giant skeletons unearthed at Athens, thought to have been Indians of gigantic proportions. Athens, Ohio, December 6. The skeletons of 2 Indians have been unearthed along the banks of Hocking River at Roach's Mill, 1/2 mile east of Athens. The excavation was made under a large building a short distance from the bank of the river. Unearthed a few feet from the skeletons were many arrowheads, which no doubt were buried with the Redskins when they were sent either by accident or natural death to the Happy Hunting Grounds. The skeletons were evidently those of gigantic men. Judging by the bones, they could not have measured less than 7 feet in stature. The bones were in an excellent state of preservation, the teeth being still firmly embedded in the maxillary bones. That's all I have of that one for now. Cave found in Indiana hints age-old race. Giant skeletons and metals strange to America seen in ancient sepulchre. Skeletons of giant red men buried at Popham, now to be dug up and paid attention to. Bath, Massachusetts, July 25th, special. It is likely that the visitors to the Tercentennial, either at Bath or Popham, may have the privilege of seeing skeletons of two of the magnificent specimens of physical manhood, such as the American Indian of the days of Sabinio, Samoet, Nahanata, and Samanos really were, which being interpreted is that when James Perkins dug the cellar of his home at Popham Beach, on the knoll just north of the Riverside Hotel, the skeletons were unearthed, who were, in life, from 6 to 7 feet in height, giants in fact. Mr. Perkins took the jawbone of one of these Indians and placed it on his own face. It completely encased his jaw, and he is a pretty good-sized man. Mr. Perkins gathered all the bones of these two skeletons together and placed them in a barrel and reinterred them, so it is proposed to dig up the barrel and have the bones set together to illustrate what manner of inhabitants Weymouth and Popham discovered in the earliest years of the 17th century when they arrived in this section of Maine. Now the top of this one is cut off, but find horned men's skulls. Remarkable discovery by archaeologists in Susquehanna Valley, Athens, Pennsylvania. Dispatch to Philadelphia Record. The archaeologists who were traversing the Susquehanna River to the bay visiting sites of Indian villages and digging up aborigine and other relics are said to have found horned men's skulls. Giant skeletons unearthed. Prehistoric graveyard discovered on an Indiana farm. Special to the Record. Grange, Indiana, December 26. A prehistoric graveyard has been unearthed on the farm of Solomon Hedrick. A large number of skeletons have been found, all more than 8 feet in height. The find was made in a mound 30 feet high. When 12 feet of the mound had been removed, the skeletons were exposed. The jaws and teeth are well preserved. Trinkets, ivory beads, and a shield made of bone were in the graves. Skeleton of a giant found. A day or two since some workmen engaged in subsoiling the grounds of Sheriff Wickham at his vineyard in East Wheeling came across a human skeleton. Although much decayed, there was little difficulty in identifying it. By placing the bones, which could not have belonged to others than a human body, in their original position. The impression made by the skeleton in the earth and the skeleton itself were measured by the sheriff and a brother in the craft locale, both of whom were prepared to swear that it was 10 feet 9 inches in length. Its jaws and teeth were almost as large as those of a horse. The bones are to be seen at the sheriff's office. Wheeling Times. The New York Times, published November 21, 1856. Mystery still surrounds Ohio County bones. Rockport, Kentucky. Associated Press. Did prehistoric giants roam the earth in Ohio County? Yes, 2 history books say. Definitely not, says Ken Karsten, an anthropologist. In 1872, a dusty old skeleton allegedly unearthed near Rockport indicated a giant over 10 feet high, according to Lewis and Richard Collins' History of Kentucky. Long ago, too, an Ohio County man exhumed bones of an enormous size close to the Green River, wrote Harrison D. Taylor and Mary Taylor Logan in Ohio County, Kentucky, in The Olden Days. Karstens, who teaches anthropology at Murray State University, said the bones may have been from a Native American burial. Anna Laura Duncan, a local historian in Hartford, the Ohio County seat, has heard the tales of prehistoric giants, but hasn't seen proof. If any bones were found, I don't know where they would be, she said. History of Kentucky, published in 1874, claimed coal prospectors mined big bones about a mile from Rockport, which is also on the Green River. They dug down 6 feet and uncovered the complete skeleton of a human body of gigantic size. The historians Collins wrote, the lower jawbone, when fitted over the lower portion of a man's face in the party of explorers, completely covered it. The thigh bone, from the hip bone to the knee, was 42 inches long, and the forearm bone from wrist to elbow measured 22 inches. This would indicate a giant over 10 feet high. Kirstens can't account for the supposed size of the bones, but he doubts the dimensions were accurate. The late Robert Render Sr., a gentleman well known and highly esteemed for his many virtues, used to relate finding a mound or grave near Green River, in which were bones of an enormous size, reported the Taylor Logan book. published in 1969. Render was large-boned himself, over 6 feet tall, the authors said. It is estimated that the bones belonged to a human one-third larger than Mr. Render, who ranked among the largest men in this country. Taylor and Logan don't say when Render found the bones, and their book is silent about what became of the remains. It is now a subject of regret that this grave had not been thoroughly examined by scientific men, and a full skeleton procured of this semi-giant race, the authors wrote. Karsten said giants never inhabited Ohio County or any place else in America. There was a popular myth in the 19th century that the mound builders were giant people wiped out by the Indians. There were even stories that the mound builders were Europeans, not Native Americans, Karsten said. He said the myth was perpetrated to discredit the Indians and to justify stealing the Indian land. The Daily News, Mackenboro, Kentucky, Monday, May 12, 2003. Giant skeletons found. Archaeologists to send expedition to explore graveyards in New Mexico where bodies were unearthed. Special to the New York Times, Los Angeles, California, February 10th. Owing to the discovery of the remains of a race of giants in Guadalupe, New Mexico, antiquarians and archaeologists are preparing an expedition further to explore that region. This determination is based on the excitement that exists among the people of a scope of country near Mesa Rico, about 200 miles southeast of Las Vegas, where an old burial ground has been discovered that has yielded skeletons of enormous size. Luciana Quintana, on whose ranch the ancient burial plot is located, discovered 2 stones that bore curious inscriptions, and beneath these were found in shallow excavations the bones of a frame that could not have been less than 12 feet in length. The men who opened the grave say the forearm was 4 feet long, and that in a well-preserved jaw the lower teeth range from the size of a hickory nut to that of the largest walnut in size. The chest of the being is reported as having a circumference of 7 feet. Quintana, who has uncovered many other burial places, expresses the opinion that perhaps thousands of skeletons of a race of giants, long extinct, will be found. This supposition is based on the traditions handed down from the early Spanish invasion that have detailed knowledge of the existence of a race of giants that inhabited the plains of what is now eastern New Mexico. Indian legends and carvings, also in the same section, indicate the existence of such a race. The New York Times, published Feb 11, 1902. Mr. Jefferson's Cyclops. A giant skeleton unearthed at Buzzards Bay. Buzzards Bay, Massachusetts, July 4th. Joseph Jefferson, the actor, has made an astonishing find on the Summer Place, which he has purchased here near that of ex-President Cleveland. In laying out the grounds and making alterations, it became necessary to remove a sand hill of large size. The workmen, while doing this, found the skeleton of a man that filled them with astonishment from its great size. When an attempt was made to lift up the skeleton, it crumbled away, all except the skull. A workman lay down by the side of it, however, and it was estimated that it must have belonged to a man at least 6 feet 5 or 6 inches in height. The most peculiar thing was brought to light, however, when the skull was taken to Mr. Jefferson and by him examined. It was like ordinary skulls, only larger, except that it had, as far as could be seen, no place where the eyes had been. There was one hole in the center of the forehead, might have once served for one eye. This led Mr. Jefferson to believe that he had perhaps discovered the skeleton of a cyclops. He said to Mr. Booth, who was paying him a visit when he saw the wonderful skull, that he and his brother actor had a chance at hand to play Hamlet, with a skull such as it had never been played with before. All the scientific gentlemen of the neighborhood have been as unable to give an explanation of the skull as were Mr. Jefferson and Mr. Booth. Mr. Jefferson will no doubt be glad to receive suggestions from men of science that may throw light on the matter. The New York Times, published July 5, 1891. Giant skeletons found. Cave in Mexico gives up the bones of an ancient race. Special to the New York Times. Boston, May 3. Charles C. Clapp, who has recently returned from Mexico, where he has been in charge of Thomas W. Lawson's mining interests, has called the attention of Professor Agassiz to a remarkable discovery made by him. He found in Mexico a cave containing some 200 skeletons of men, each above 8 feet in height. The cave was evidently the burial place of a race of giants who antedated the Aztecs. Mr. Clapp arranged the bones of one of these skeletons and found the total length to be 8 feet 11 inches. The femur reached up to his thigh, and the molars were big enough to crack a coconut. The head measured 18 inches from front to back. The New York Times, published May 4, 1908. Strange skeletons found. Indications that tribe hitherto unknown once lived in Wisconsin. Special to the New York Times. Madison, Wisconsin, May 3rd. The discovery of several skeletons of human beings while excavating a mound at Lake Delavan indicates that a heretofore unknown race of men once inhabited southern Wisconsin. Information of the discovery was brought to Madison today by Maurice Morrissey of Delavan, who came here to attend a meeting of the Republican State Central Committee. Curator Charles E. Brown of the State Historical Museum will investigate the discoveries within a few days. Upon opening one large mound at Lake Lawn Farm, 18 skeletons were discovered by the Phillips brothers. The heads, presumably those of men, are much larger than the heads of any race which inhabited America today. From directly over the eye sockets, the head slopes straight back, and the nasal bones protrude far above the cheekbones. The jaw bones are long and pointed, bearing a minute resemblance to the head of the monkey. The teeth in the front of the jaw are regular molars. There were also found in the mounds the skeletons presumably of women, which had smaller heads but were similar in facial characteristics. The skeletons were embedded in charcoal and covered over with layers of baked clay to shed water from the sepulchre. The New York Times, published May 4, 1912. 5 giant skeletons unearthed. One of the most important discoveries of the many made in the prolific field of Indian mounds near Homer, Ohio, was made near there a few days ago. Beneath a small mound and 5 feet below the normal surface, 5 gigantic skeletons, with their feet to the east, were found in a grave with a stone floor. Remnants of burned bones and wood charcoal are plentiful, together with numerous stone vessels and weapons. The skeletons are of enormous size, the head of one being the size of a wooden bucket. The most striking articles besides the skeletons were a finely finished stone pipe, the bowl being large and polished and engraved with considerable care in a simple way. The figures are birds and beasts, a knife shaped like a sickle reversed, and having a wooden handle held by leather thongs, and a kettle holding perhaps 6 quarts. Those who know say this find is one of the oldest in America, and perhaps the most valuable. Race of men were giants. Bones recently found show gigantic stature and a low order of intelligence. 11 skeletons of primitive men, with foreheads sloping directly back from the eyes, and with 2 rows of teeth in the front upper jaw, have been uncovered in Craig's Hill at Ellenburg, Washington. They were found about 20 feet below the surface, 20 feet back from the face of the slope, in a cement rock formation over which was a layer of shale. The rock, that one cuts off there. Skeleton 7 feet long. Centerburg, Ohio, May 4th. Licking County has been for years a favorite field for students of Indian history, there being here 2 old forts and scores of mounds. Last week a small mound near Homer was opened by some schoolboys, who found a skeleton. Today further search was made, and several feet below the surface of the earth in a large vault, with stone floor and bark covering, were found 4 huge skeletons, 3 being each over 7 feet in length, and the other 8. The skeletons lay with their feet to the east on a bed of charcoal, in which were numerous partially burned bones. About the neck of the largest skeleton were a lot of stone beads, evidently a necklace in life. The grave contained about 80 stone vessels and implements, the most striking being a curiously wrought pipe, the bowl having a series of carved figures upon it representing a contest between animals and birds. It is said to be the only engraved stone pipe ever found. A stone kettle holding about a gallon, in which was a residue of saline matter, bears evidence of much skill. Their bows, a number of arrows, stone hatchets, and a stone knife are among the implements. The knife is of peculiar shape, with a curved blade and wooden handle. Students of Indian archaeology claim it is the most valuable find ever made in that line. I think it's really interesting that carved on the pipe was an engraving of a contest or a battle between animals and birds. And if you know what I'm referencing from the actual Book of Giants, then you'll understand what I mean by that. The bones of a giant found. St. Paul, Minnesota, May 24th. A skull of heroic size and singular formation has been discovered among the relics of the mound builders in the Red River Valley. The mound was 60 feet in diameter and 12 feet high. Near the center were found the bones of about a dozen men and women, mixed with the bones of various animals. The skull in question was the only perfect one, and near it were found some abnormally large body bones. The man who bore it was evidently a giant. A thorough investigation of the mound and its contents will be made by the Historical Society. The New York Times, published May 25, 1882. Gee, I wonder what happened to those bones. When giants roamed Earth. The past was more prolific in the production of giants than the present. In 1830, one of these giants, who was exhibited at Rouen, was 10 feet high, and the giant Galabra, brought from Arabia to Rome in the time of Claudius Caesar, was the same height. Phanom, who lived in the time of Eugene II, was 11 1/2 feet in height. The Chevalier Scrogg, in his journey to the Peak Tenerific, found in one of the caverns of that mountain the head of a giant who had 60 teeth and who was not less than 15 feet high. The giant Ferragus, slain by Orlando, the nephew of Charlemagne, according to reports, was 28 feet high. In 1814, near Saint Gernad, was found the tomb of the giant Isolant, or Isolant, who was not less than 30 feet high. In 1590, near Rouen, was found a skeleton whose head held a bushel of corn, and which was almost 19 feet in height. The giant Bakri was 22 feet high. In 1623, near the castle in Dauphine, a tomb was found 30 feet long, 16 feet wide, and 8 feet high, of which were cut in grey stone the words Keptalocbus Rex. The skeleton was found entire and measured 25 1/4 feet high, 10 feet across the shoulders, and 5 feet from breastbone to the back. But France is not the only country where giant skeletons have been unearthed. Near Palermo, Sicily, in 1516, was found the skeleton of a giant 30 feet high. Near Magrino, on the same island, in 1816, was found the skeleton of a giant of 30 feet, whose head was the size of a hogshead, and each tooth weighed 5 ounces. Standing tall in the land of Genghis Khan. During the first of 5 expeditions to Mongolia, Roy Chapman Andrews photographed this 7-foot 5-inch man in 1922 in the capital city of Ulaanbaatar. This photograph was never published in the magazine National Geographic, December 1996. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives, of all which they chose. Genesis 6, 1 and 2. Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Wisconsin mound opened. Skeleton found of a man over 9 feet high with an enormous skull. Maple Creek, Wisconsin, December 19th. One of the 3 recently discovered mounds in this town has been opened. In it was found the skeleton of a man of gigantic size. The bones measured from head to foot over 9 feet and were in a fair state of preservation. The skull was as large as a half-bushel measure. Some finely tempered rods of copper and other relics were lying near the bones. The mound from which these relics were taken is 10 feet high and 30 feet long, and varies from 6 to 8 feet in width. The 2 mounds of lesser size also will be excavated soon. The New York Times, published December 29, 1897. Find giant Indians' bones. Workmen on Harlem Road unearth relics of Tequa tribe, special to the New York Times. Katona, New York, September 6. While a gang of men in the employ of the New York and Harlem Railroad were taking sand from an immense mound near Purdy Station today to fill in an excavation, they unearthed several skeletons of unusual size. The bones are believed to be those of Indians who once lived in this vicinity and belonged to a tribe that was led by the great chief Tequa, from whom the Tilias Valley, now a part of the New York watershed, takes its name. Besides finding the bones, the workmen also exhumed a score or more of arrowheads, hatchets, and copper implements. It is believed that the large mound in which the relics were found was once the burying ground of the Tequa Indians. The last Indians were seen in the valley a short time after the Revolutionary War. The bones found today were brought to Katona and will be reinterred in the local cemetery. The New York Times, September 7, 1904. A race of giants in Old Gale or Old Call. In the year 1800, some human bones of enormous size, double the ordinary, in fact, were found in the tumulus of Castle Ness, Ildra, and I can't see the rest of it. Or Castleman's Indraft. On to the next one. Skeleton 7 feet long. Centerburg, Ohio, May 4. Licking County, so we've read that one already. The bones of a giant found, St. Paul, Minnesota. We read that one. A giant remains in a mound. From the Charleston Ward FA cell. Professor Norris, the ethnologist, who has been examining the mounds in this section of West Virginia for several months, the other day opened the big mound on Colonel B.H. Smith's farm, 6 or 8 miles below here. This is the largest mound in the valley and proved a rich storehouse. The mound is 50 feet high, and they dug down to the bottom. It was evidently the burial place of a noted chief who had been interred with unusual honors. At the bottom, they found the bones of a human being measuring, and it's impossible to say, it's at least a 7 or a 9. 7 to 9 feet. The grave of a giant. Visitors go up on Plago almost every pleasant day. Mrs. Allwater, who is making some improvements, is still there, and Mr. Cottrell of Mansfield is there and drives the town down, and drives the Athens Historical Society. Mr. Cottrell of Mansfield is there and drives the something, I'm not sure what it is, it's tractor maybe, down occasionally for visitors. The Athens Historical Society sent word to the mountain that they would visit it next Saturday. They claimed to know of an Indian grave on the top that they would open. The only Indian grave we ever know of, says the Troy Garrett, was one of the south point of the mountain on the farm of Obadias W. Hooker, or Obus W. Hooker. A very large thigh bone of a human being was dug up 45 years ago at some point near a spring. It was of immense size, and on its being shown to Dr. Theodore Wilder, he said it must have belonged to a man 7 feet high. There were giants in those days. Towhide Daily Review, 1625-1957. Strange find made on Malibu Ranch. Strange find made on Malibu Ranch. Skeletons of 14 Indians unearthed whose stature is far larger than that of the modern man. Special to the Herald. Santa Monica, July 8. John Stoneberger and William Derbyshire have returned from an excursion to the Malibu Ranch where they found skulls and skeletons of 14 Indians who must have been of enormous size. The bones of the arms and legs are at least 1/2 larger than those of the men of today. The discovery was made near Malibu Railway Wharf. With the 2 bones were stone implements and weapons. Jude 1:6. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Jude 1:7. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah, and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication, and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire.